This image is, without question, one of the most recognized in the entire history of art. For 5 centuries, it has appeared on the walls of museums, in philosophy books, on posters, and in popular culture around the world. And yet there is a detail hidden in plain sight that most people never stop to notice. Look closely at Adam's left hand. His index finger is not fully extended toward God. It is slightly curled, as if he could reach but chose, in some subtle way, not to, not entirely. That small detail, easy to overlook from the ground, 60 feet below, is actually the key to understanding everything Michelangelo painted here. The creation of Adam was painted between 1508 and 1512 on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Vatican City, one of the most ambitious artistic undertakings in human history. Pope Julius II commissioned Michelangelo for the project in 1508. At the time, Michelangelo considered himself primarily a sculptor, not a painter. He accepted reluctantly. What followed was 4 years of extraordinary labor, lying on scaffolding, painting above his head, working in near solitude. The result covered more than 500 square meters of vault, over 300 figures, 9 scenes from the book of Genesis, and a visual theology so complex that scholars are still uncovering its layers today. Among all those scenes, it is this one, 2 hands, almost touching, that became the defining image of the entire ceiling. To understand what Michelangelo was doing, we have to understand the moment in which he lived. The Italian Renaissance, roughly from the 14th to the 16th century, was not merely an artistic movement. It was a complete rethinking of what it meant to be human. For much of the medieval period, dominant theological thought had taught that humanity was essentially passive before God. Man was seen as a fallen creature, dependent on divine grace, shaped by forces beyond his control. Salvation was something that came from above, not something pursued from below. But Renaissance thinkers increasingly emphasized human potential, individual choice, and the capacity to shape one's own destiny. Michelangelo absorbed these ideas during his years in Florence, and they would profoundly influence the way he approached the biblical story of creation. And nowhere is that influence more visible than in the creation of Adam. Now let's read the painting itself carefully. On the right, God is suspended in the heavens. His body is convex, forward-thrusting, charged with energy. A great cloak billows behind him, filled with wind and motion. Angels surround him, pressing close, holding him aloft. His right arm is outstretched to the very limit of its reach, and his index finger fully extended points toward Adam with absolute intention. On the left, Adam reclines on the earth. His body is concave, receptive, almost languid. His right arm rests on the ground, supporting his weight. His left arm rises, following the same angle as God's, but not with the same force. And his index finger, as we noted, is slightly curled. This is not an accidental asymmetry. Michelangelo was one of the greatest anatomists of his age. He had spent years dissecting human cadavers to understand the body with a precision that no artist before him had achieved. He knew exactly what a fully extended finger looked like, and he chose not to paint one on Adam's hand. The traditional reading of this scene, going back to the book of Genesis, is that God is creating Adam, breathing life into a body of clay. But by 1508, Michelangelo was doing something more philosophically precise than illustration. In this painting, Adam already exists. He already has form, weight, musculature, beauty. What is suspended in the space between those 2 fingers is not the creation of a body, but the transmission of something far deeper, the divine spark, consciousness, the capacity for self-determination. And for that transmission to occur, God has already done his part. He has crossed the heavens, stretched his arm, extended his finger to the absolute limit of his reach. He has offered everything he can offer. What happens next is entirely up to Adam. That narrow gap, just a few centimeters on the plaster, an infinite distance in meaning, is where the entire philosophical argument of this painting lives. It is where free will lives. This reading is not a modern invention. It reflects something that Renaissance philosophers had debated openly and publicly. Pico della Mirandola had written that man could descend until he was no better than a beast, or ascend until he approached the divine. That ambivalence, that radical freedom was, for Renaissance humanism, the most extraordinary and terrifying thing about the human condition. Adam's curled finger should not be read as weakness. It is not the gesture of a creature who cannot quite reach his creator. It is the mark of a being who has the capacity to choose and who has not yet chosen. Michelangelo captured a moment suspended in time. The instant before the decision. Before the reaching or the turning away. Before the ascent or the descent. But there is one more layer to this painting, one that went entirely unnoticed for nearly 5 centuries. In 1990, an American neurosurgeon named Frank Meshberger published a paper in the Journal of the American Medical Association with a striking observation. The shape of the cloak surrounding God and the angels, its outer contour, its internal folds, even the figure hanging below it, corresponds with extraordinary precision to a human brain seen in sagittal cross-section. The outer edge of the cloak maps to the cerebral cortex. The lower left angle aligns with the brainstem. The green scarf-like figure that hangs below reproduces the shape of the frontal lobe. And the crease that runs through the center of the cloak follows the line of the Sylvian fissure, the major fold that separates the brain's temporal and frontal regions. If the form surrounding God is indeed a brain, then what God is transmitting to Adam is not merely the breath of life, as Genesis describes it. It is intelligence itself, consciousness, the capacity to think, to reason, and therefore to choose. And suddenly, Adam's curled finger takes on yet another layer of meaning. The gift has already been given. The brain, the capacity for reason, is already there. What remains is the question of whether Adam will use it, whether he will extend that finger and close the distance, whether he will choose to reach. For more than 500 years, millions of people have stood beneath this ceiling and looked up at that image. Most of them saw 2 figures, almost touching. What Michelangelo actually painted was a question about freedom, about consciousness, about the distance between what we are given and what we choose to do with it. A question he embedded in a painting so famous that it became invisible, hidden in plain sight on the ceiling of the world. And at the center of it all, a finger, slightly curled, suspended in the moment before the decision.